morning, we also have the General Assembly of our Italian member association, the Italian Digital SME Alliance. So as you understand, as I'm Italian, I can absolutely not miss that meeting. So I will, while we talk, I will leave the moderation to my colleague Annika Link, who everyone, I suppose you know her. She's our policy person, and she's absolutely well placed to moderate the conversation. With that, hi Annika, I see you also well now.
Thank you, Sebastiano, and well, hi everyone.
Yeah, with that, I think I would like to already give the floor to Malte from the European Commission. As I said, Malte Beyer-Katzenberger. Sorry for Malte, for me not being really able to pronounce your full name. As I said, you will introduce the topic. You will try to explain in short and clear terms what the Commission wants to do with this act, and that is gonna probably, absolutely open up the conversation for questions and comments by the members of the group. So, Malte, I don't know if you have slides that I'd like to give you. Okay, I'd like to give you the floor so you can start your introduction.
Yeah, that's really appreciated. Thank you, Sebastiano. Thank you, Annika. I'm very happy to participate in this forum. And as Sebastian said, it's not the first time that we speak. We have been conversing over the past 4 years, I would say. I'm a lawyer by training. I'm a policy officer in DG CNECT, which is the digital arm of the European Commission, in a horizontal unit that tries to stimulate the data-driven economy. If there's bandwidth issues, which happen sometimes, please shout. I cannot read the forum messages at the same time as I'm talking, so please just interrupt me. And if I'm cut, well, then it's hard to interrupt me. But sometimes happens, and that's really also stupid. So connectivity is not always on my side. And I think maybe some of you also experience the same thing. I was saying I'm working on data-driven innovation for already 10 years. First on opening up public sector information, government data, but since 2014 mostly on also increasing data sharing, as we call it, data access in B2B situations. And this is the topic of today. You may have seen that in February last year, the Commission at the, I would say, drive of Thierry Breton, who is our commissioner, has published a data strategy. It was really a fast run. The Commission had been formally in place, I think, on the 1st of December of 2019, and on the 19th of February 2020, we already were able to publish a coordinated document. If you know how the Commission works, how much we have to consult colleagues, you will probably appreciate the fast moving on this topic. This is the result of a discussion at a higher level where the Commission President had made promises to present a framework on AI, mostly on the liability issues, but maybe also on other issues around the artificial intelligence. And our topic of access to data in the context of AI was always a bit like a marginal topic. And then Thierry Breton came in and said, well, it's not the marginal topic, it's actually the fundamental and actually preceding topic. And well, besides that, data is useful in the context of AI, data is also useful for anything else that may happen in terms of data-driven innovation. So he said, we must first look at the issue of data governance. And secondly, we must look at this because there's a coming wave, as he would formulate it, of data and maybe an evolution of the data economy overall that we've so far have seen mostly as a personal data economy with mega platforms and all the issues around that, and the consumers and the privacy problems and the big tech backlash and so forth. But there is also an emerging industrial data economy, which is mostly constituted of non-personal data, but which by no means have less value for that reason. It's just that they have maybe a much more specific value that is more focused on specific context. And not everything is advertisement in the economy. I mean, so far, maybe also the use we made of the personal data in the economy to target advertisement was maybe not the ultimate end situation of that. And we also come that how we can actually make also the personal data economy evolve. So the evolution of the data economy on these both fronts was his key theme: stimulate ecosystems to emerge in Europe, having companies feel comfortable about the use they have. So the issue of data sovereignty, if you want, but at the same time also leveraging on the potential of data, which lies in its reuse. So not every data has to be created from scratch for a new purpose. Sometimes yes, but maybe there's also a lot of potential in reusing existing data. And when you reuse, oftentimes you don't have it, so someone else has to give it to you. We call it sharing. You can also call it monetization, because this other company may want something in return. So the term data sharing that we introduced is by no means focused on free and open for everyone. It can be really also a bilateral monetization or trading situation. So this is maybe the broad picture. On the international front, also he said we want certainly to be an open economy, but we also want to see that value capture happens in Europe, and that we also want trust that companies can have, that they can control the use of the data they produce. And for the individuals, that has been achieved with the GDPR, but for companies, data, this is was a task left mainly to them. And then finally, well, how to broaden access for many players, and in particular the SMEs. That was a strand of this discussion. Now, how do we want to organize from the broad concepts? And the first term I would like to introduce, you certainly have heard about it, is the concept of common European data spaces. It grows a bit out of the discussion on industrial data sharing platforms. And what it aims is to basically, it's an organizing concept. It's an organizing concept much more than the idea to set in place a specific IT infrastructure on which everything would run. So I'm highlighting this really upfront. Common European data spaces are first and foremost an organizing concept, which may materialize in a data sharing platform or ecosystem, but hopefully mostly to form basically open ecosystems that are independent from any dominant player that would basically organize it around their needs as it happens. I mean, not only the big techs are doing that, and it's often very useful, and it makes sense from the perspective of the big players. But maybe also there is then sometimes an issue of trust, and maybe also we need ecosystems next to these big industry-driven ecosystems. And why is this ecosystem approach useful? Because within the ecosystem, you can agree on common rules and standards, legal and technical standards, that make the collaboration, the data sharing, easier and less costly for everyone, so that you don't have to from scratch set up your data sharing situation each time, but that you can join an organized ecosystem where certain rules are in place, and you can basically plug and play the situation as you want. Well, yesterday, but that's maybe now going to the really company level of the offerings, I saw the presentation on the Deutsche Telecom Data Intelligence Hub, which offers itself as basically a tool for organizing ecosystems with digital workspaces that are basically plug and play, and the data are drag and drop almost into your workspace, so that we get the ease of use, so that data sharing becomes really a standard thing. You have heard certainly about certain specific data spaces. In Germany, there's a mobility data space discussion where a nucleus is built around which then use cases can be articulated. The data sharing for the use case can be organized. The rules on who can use what data can be organized. So you build, a data space not top down. You build it obviously from organically grown use cases that make certain sense, and then you slowly make a data governance also evolve that defines what type of sharing architecture we have and what usage rights we are. And one specific example that you also know is Gaia X, which has a strong secure cloud component, but which also has the international data spaces driven data sharing architecture through a reference architecture, where there's also a lot of standardization happen that should make controlled data sharing happen for those companies that participate and use the technology developed by the International Data Space Association. So there are certain approaches already we're seeing. You can also see very local installations. I mean, the Brussels Cargo Hub has a platform for digital collaboration between all the players that come together on a cargo airport, the freight forwarders, the airlines, the merchants that ship, the customs, the ground handlers, and so forth. They all need to collaborate. There are many of them. There's maybe no natural candidate other than maybe the airport company itself to drive this. And then also you need specific expertise on the platforms. And here in that specific case, there is a platform provider, if you want, called Malian, a small, I think, Belgian company that basically then organizes the ecosystem and also develops the rules according to which the data sharing happens. So data spaces can have a very local implementation, but our ambition is certainly that they should transcend local implementations and become a more encompassing framework for data sharing with the governance. Now, it's important in this context that the Commission is not setting them up and will not operate them for most of the time, maybe full. I'm not sure exactly on the health data space, which is also being talked about, the Common European Health Data Space, and the role of the Commission may be stronger in that respect. Otherwise, I'm now thinking of digital agriculture, we're playing a role of a facilitator to make these open ecosystems emerge, because if you don't have a big player who drives this ecosystem constitution, I mean, it's maybe hard to organize the ecosystem. And that's maybe already a first message. I mean, if you see in your respective fields such ecosystem emerge, I mean, join them and make them stronger, because they also need gravity. I'm thinking now about a farming hub in France, API Agro, which is also an independent, open ecosystem approach to make digital farming happen outside, I would say, a Bayer Monsanto or John Deere situation. So yeah, they need obviously gravity or network effects, if you want. The more participate, the higher the value for everyone. So if you see in your ecosystem such data spaces, data ecosystems emerge, I mean, you join them, so to make them also a bit stronger and more valuable than for everyone. That's also maybe it's a joint effort. So the Commission will play a role to catalyze, but then the stakeholders have to drive. So the stakeholders being the industry that benefits from the value of data exchanges and data sharing. They need to drive and ultimately also to design the governance rules. I mean, there can be maybe an independent arbiter like the Commission or regional or local government or national government to help a bit facilitate and keep fairness in the whole thing. But ultimately, don't look too much, I think, at the government side. Ecosystems need to be driven by the stakeholders. They may also, and that's now we transcend into the Data Governance Act and how this actually plays into how the Data Governance Act comes into play. They may be instigated, as in the case of the Brussels Cargo Airport, by a specific offering of a company that drives and plays the role of an ecosystem orchestrator. And we want these companies to emerge. We call them data sharing service providers. In our proposal, it's Article 9 of the Data Governance Act. You still hear me? I see a new face. Good morning, Panayotis.
Yes, we still hear you.
Yes, Malte, please go ahead. We hear you loud and clear, so no worries.
So something switched on my screen, so I was wondering. Very good. Now on the Data Governance Act, and maybe a final round of comments on the data spaces. What we will do is facilitating the emergence, but also some kick funding under the Digital Europe program. So there will be serious money on the table to get at least a number of data spaces going, which ones we're currently defining, and please wait for the Commission to do that. It's not our team that will run all this. We will coordinate this, but then the sector-specific colleagues will drive it. So colleagues in DG Agri will drive the DG Agriculture space. There will be a health data space, as I've said already. There may be a manufacturing data space, we don't know. So in different ecosystems, we will will play a role as more technical experts can play a role. Now, coming now to the Data Governance Act, it again doesn't provide the governance of data spaces. As I said, it leaves the decisions on governance to the stakeholders to arrange for this, but it tries to regulate the players that may play a crucial role in facilitating the emergence of digital ecosystems. And here we introduce a new kind of player, a new term, the term of the data sharing service providers. And this basically reflects the call that we saw around in many discussion documents, that the data economy may need dedicated data intermediaries or data institutions. And they have different names. That makes the conversation also a bit complicated. So I think in the UK AI strategy was a call for data trusts. A data trust is certainly a data intermediary that has certain roles and functions according to the English notion of trust law. In the French AI strategy, there was a call for data pooling and sharing platforms that need to emerge, so that you are making also AI-driven innovation a bit independent from those mega platforms who could easily service this, but maybe they don't cover each and every aspect of life and every aspect of industry, and maybe they shouldn't overall, because that would make them really even more powerful than they are already today. So the question is, if we want to drive AI-driven ecosystems, we probably need also to collaborate and pool around data among companies to build the data pools that we need. And then there's a discussion, I think, in my own country, Germany, on data and Treuhänder and on neutral data trustees that also play a role in organizing the data flows. And why is that important? For us, it's important for two respects. It's first to respect data sovereignty, so that it is possible for companies to share data while maintaining full control and over the use of the data, and also control over the value that is generated over the data, while at the same time allowing companies, especially I think companies in your association, to seek help, to make recourse to a third party. Of course, you can organize your data ecosystems bilaterally, everything contractually, that's very fine, but it may be a lot of work and you may need to define certain things from scratch. If now a service provider comes and says, hey, I can organize data sharing for you, I'm a data marketplace, I can set you up a data ecosystem, as I just described, Brussels Cargo App or API Agro in the digital farming, and then you just plug yourself into this existing ecosystem. It will drive down the cost of organizing these ecosystems. But then the question really comes in: why would I trust this third party? And here, the Data Governance Act wants to really force these players to not monetize on the data themselves, but really only take the role of a facilitator, of transacting in the data, of maybe organizing a pool, but then giving all the revenue that the use of the pool generates back to the contributors of the pool, keeping obviously a little margin to operate the pool. That's clear, but shifting away again, that everything is now, I mean, everyone makes a bet on the data, on the value of the data, and tries to suck in as much as possible and then be relatively free to monetize on the data, hoping that a lot of value comes out of this. And shifting this model back to a normal commercial model, which is you offer me a service, I give you money. And that's also what Deutsche Telecom Data Intelligence Hub does, and all the ecosystems that we know. They take obviously either subscription fee or a transaction fee. So they want to earn money. That's obviously important to run these platforms, but they are not speculating on the value of the data that you may transact through the platform. And because they have no means, they should have no means to monetize on these data. And this is maybe the first key brick in Article 9 and following of the proposal, to say we want to establish these new service providers, and you can only be a service provider of this kind if you are respecting these rules. So there's no competition also with the classical model of data brokering, and that is possible. Data brokering remains possible, so companies are still free to basically sell on their data to someone who says, well, give me your data and I pay you something, and then I'm free basically to make use of the data in the way I want. this model remains valid. However, there should be a separate type of service, which is just a sharing facilitator service, a sharing service that should come also on the market. And in the Gaia X architecture, you have that. You have the data broker function. App stores are another typical also basically you want to have access to services that help you with your data. Who is running the App Store? Should the App Store basically sell your data to the users? No, it shouldn't. It should merely facilitate you having access to applications and organize the market. And that's very important from our point of view. The second thing is obviously so first thing is data sovereignty. The second thing is that that there's also a certain competition on the other side. So if a lot of apps are now coming to an App Store, can the owner of the App Store basically offer apps in competition with all these apps? And then is there a ranking and self-preferencing problem? That is also addressed in our proposal. So we want a rather clean solution. So if you are an ecosystem orchestrator, you should not be yourself participating in the ecosystem, possibly in competition with others. But I'm happy also to discuss this part. So this is already maybe the really biggest block of the proposal. We have a long recital in the proposal. I think it's 23 or 22 that really says what are we not trying to capture. I don't want to go into detail in this first round, maybe, but just to give you maybe the gist of the inspiration of what we want to do. Under the same cover, we also want to empower the individuals. It's maybe interesting, but maybe not directly relevant for your business. So we also want that individuals have a personal data space where they can take back the data, copies of their data rather, that are currently proliferating among many organizations, have that data under their control, either really in the physical space for data processing in that space, or actually for transmission of the data to another company, so that also the individual can actually become a much more of an agent, depending now on the types of businesses you have. Are you consumer facing or not so much? It may be interesting for you to also see this angle. So here we try to play on the situation that the individual has a right to port his or her data from any company that has it, a data controller, and basically be also can also maybe have an indirect access situation. So if you have trouble with a specific company that doesn't just give you the data, well, try to motivate the clients, and we can discuss how that would really work to do it for you by saying, I want to port my data. And here we see, because the clients wouldn't do it by themselves, it would be too cumbersome for them, we see a role also for certain personal data intermediaries that would help actually the individuals to do so and do it at a certain level of ease. And also then go with a certain user base to bigger companies and say, hey guys, you have to really make portability easier at the technical level because it's not functioning well. And actually you should use this format rather than that format, because on the downstream markets, this formats are much more useful. Happy to go into that specific detail if it's of interest. I maybe look at 3 other situations, and I will be shorter on these 3 points. It's 4. It's what do we do about certain public sector data? What do we mean by data altruism? How do we go about standardization? I saw also a colleague from Etsy in the call. And what's the relationship with other legal acts? So 4 points to round off, and then we certainly should go into a discussion. First point, what is happening on public sector data? We're having an open data policy for data that are held by the public sector and are generally accessible. That's notably statistical information or weather information that is rather innocent in terms of its commercial value, because it's generated entirely by the public sector. However, there are also databases that contain information that have been submitted by companies and by individuals, so commercially confidential and personal data. Here, obviously, you can't open these databases to just anyone. What we try to, however, explain with the proposal is that there are novel techniques to do data analytics on top of data without compromising the privacy of the information. And we call them now the secure processing environment. So what should happen is that there may be a public sector database. See, for example, the filings of pharmaceutical companies for vaccines under COVID. That's very confidential information. However, you can probably under controlled, we're confident that you can allow in a supervised data analytics situation, supervised by the public sector, to ask these databases certain questions. And you can obviously only ask questions that don't expose then the full analytics of the data, but you can maybe identify certain things that don't have a commercial value for the companies that was supposed to submit the data, or for individuals. Now, this is obviously technically very complicated. I don't have to tell you that. So it will require data scientists to be present in the public sector. But we're seeing it happening. The French have set up the Health Data Hub. It's exactly this type of arrangement. So data are pooled from public sector databases and can be accessible for research, can be medical imagery data, it can be lots of things. The same goes in Finland. We have the FinData Authority for certain selected public registers. And in Germany, we have the approach of the so-called research data centers, or Forschungsdatenzentrum, where 38 public registers are accessible in this controlled fashion. Not least the statistical offices, where also research under certain conditions is possible, and statistical microdata. So actually data that are resulting from the surveys that companies have filled in, and where also certain extractions are possible under supervised conditions. These data are often pre-processed, and very often you have to come on premise. You can only use certain computers. You cannot take your phones, and there's a lot of control around this, but there's a certain experience also on this. And what we want to do under this first block is to also promote this approach much further. A second short point, companies, including you, may want to donate data for scientific and other users. In order to facilitate this, we invented the concept of data altruism and data altruism organizations. So we think that, and also the French AI strategy puts this somewhere in the data part, that maybe also voluntarily and altruistically made available data can be a good basis for research. So a call on you to think about this, but also maybe then to see whether you want to stimulate also the emergence of data altruism pools. My third point is the Data Innovation Board, which is the locus of a better, I would say, governance of standardization. We felt over the years that we have not made very good input as a Commission unit to the ICT rolling plan on ICT standardization and to the multi-stakeholder forum. We were basically a very passive actor, and we want to gear up a bit our own involvement in steering of the ICT standardization. We don't want to standardize ourselves. We want to just maybe better sift through the needs. And in particular on two fronts, we want to make sure that the data spaces that may become too sectoral just because they grew organically out of a sectoral need, that they are not the new silos, so that we build also bridges between the common European data spaces that emerge. And secondly, we see also a role for the Data Innovation Board to basically take maybe standards developed under Gaia X to a certain political level and give them a certain legitimacy beyond the industry-driven approach that it has seen so far. So that's mainly the task of the so-called Data Innovation Board, which will be a Commission expert group with subgroups to discuss this. And my final point is the relationship with other legal actions. You have seen the Digital Market Acts, you have seen the thresholds of the players that are captured. So it's really the big mega players. Internally, we say, well, this might be 10, maybe 15 companies in scope of the Digital Markets Act in practice of today. Maybe tomorrow that changes because the actors evolve and other actors become powerful and dominant, who knows? Thinking about the automotive ecosystem, especially. But the obligations, there are obligations on facilitating data portability in Article 6 that I find very interesting. But obviously the scope of application of the Digital Markets Act is relatively limited to a limited number of very interesting, however, players. We also have a Data Act in the making, and I'm trying also maybe prepare this forum for a horizontal intervention on data in terms of substantive questions of data access and use. The Data Governance Act, as you maybe now learned, is mainly revolving around the idea that companies want to share in a data sharing system because they have a benefit, so it's voluntary. no one under the Data Governance Act is forced to share, not even the public sector. The public sector is only bound by a non-discrimination obligation. Once it shares with one, it has to share with others under similar conditions. But companies under data governance basically remain free to share or not to share. Now, how to remedy structural failures of data access in certain ecosystems, and maybe also structural imbalances that are well, adversely affecting the small and medium-sized enterprises. Here, I'm really also looking forward to comments in the discussion. It has to be it has to be a general problem from our perspective across all sectors. If it's a sectoral problem, it probably has to be taken to a sectoral initiative. Automotive is very likely coming next, as you know. But maybe there are also other sectors where we need to facilitate really key data held by key players, because they are so useful for so many players. If your data problem, access problem is in a specific context and it's really limited to either a few companies, or the sector is rather small or niche, it will probably be hard to attract attention to your problem. You can go along making complaints to DG competition if it's few companies, and then hope that they resolve the problem for you. I think legislation can really only solve structural problems. And again, legislation has then to be sectoral if it's really a sector problem. And only if we see a really transversal problem, we should tackle it at the horizontal level. We still think around the general problems of IoT connected objects that may be independent of the sectors in which they are manufactured and operating, but also knowing that different IoT markets are very different. So smart tractors are very different market than smart lifts, and the same, and they're still different from smart robots. So it's very hard maybe to do general principles. There is also a question of fairness of contracts. I'll be finished in a moment, Annika. So also here, your thoughts on this. This is a future coming action. We are preparing now the prepared documents. We will consult on our ideas, I think, as of mid-February, I would say, with the typical things, inception, impact assessment, and an online questionnaire. And also happy to have your input on that. Wait a little bit on this Data Act, what it exactly will mean until these documents are being published. But otherwise, also engage in sector-specific ecosystems. And happy to also guide you if you don't know where to call. I might maybe stop it here. I gave you a lot of information, and now we should certainly go to question, answer, or discussions. Thank you very much for the attention, and happy to have feedback.
Thank you very much, Malte. This was a comprehensive overview where you really went back to you really explained well the rationale of where this comes from. And I think this also resonates with what we've discussed in the focus group on AI previously, that data is really fundamental. So, you know, we have this group of 100 AI companies, and when we were asking them, you know, what are the hurdles to AI uptake, access to data, and data came up in the survey as one of the top priorities. So I think this discussion here is really going to help us also to understand this initiative by the Commission better. So I would like to give the floor now to everyone from the audience. There are a couple of rules, so I would like, if you have a question, please put your question, or please put your name in the chat, or say, I would like to ask a question, so we can go in that order. And also, I have put a link in the chat, which leads you to a poll. So because we are more participants than the number of questions we can probably ask. So you can also click on this link and answer the poll that is there, which is more general. So, you know, we wanted to see how well informed SMEs are actually about this Data Governance Act, if you've heard about it before, or if this is completely new. And I think with this discussion here, we also want to help to create this link, you know, to understand how SMEs see this and how they can actually benefit from these ideas, for instance, from the data spaces and so on. So yeah, please put your questions or put your names here in the chat, and when you want to ask your question, you can unmute yourselves and turn on your camera. And please don't be shy. I see that there is one question already from Lindsay Frost. I also got a private message actually from Vasiliki. Okay, so maybe we can start with the question put by Lindsay and then move to Vasiliki. So Lindsay, you put your question here. Do you also want to turn on your camera and ask it directly?
Okay, sure. Thank you very much. Thank you for the very broad introduction and information. The question and the direction I'm coming from is I see so many activities, and you've listed half a dozen I did not realize yet. And the difficulty is to combine forces, like even here today, so that not everybody has to investigate and understand and be active in everything. So that's what I'd like to ask. How does the Commission see, or how does your department see the best way forward, or the initial way forward, to get this building of bridges between data spaces and to get people on a, let's say, a similar mindset, or at least picking from 3 or 4 useful options rather than developing 100 different ones? And this is one of the key troubles in all of standardization, and that's where I'm coming from with my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I can maybe directly react because I'm intrigued by the question. I'm reading it on the chat at the same time. Thank you really very much for that. And it's, for me, it's also a riddle. And a lot of questions have been asked to us. Why do you still design your data spaces in a sectoral approach? It's a really fair question. It's maybe also the internal logic of the Commission says, well, we have different departments. We have nurtured stakeholder audiences that are clustered around traditional industry sectors. I might bring the question back to you, whether all AI is cross-domain. I can easily see, for example, if you want to do local implementations of machine optimization in factories, it can be very local and very sectoral, because you want a specific type of machine to do certain things. So I wonder what type of AI is cross-domain. And then for us, the question indeed is how to basically make the nucleus of an ecosystem. I'm trying to use that word, of stakeholders to organize themselves around a specific need. So it has to crystallize around use cases. They don't have to be tagged sector. There can be maybe cross-sector use cases, but somehow someone has to then take a leadership, and we're certainly, I think, as Commission, want to play a role with the limited capacity that we have. But all this to say that I think what I would call cross-sector standardization is hard, because there's so many cross-sector relationships that you can organize, and how to prioritize those, that is a bit the task of the board. But among the many theoretically possible options, some have to emerge because they're driven by real people, real companies with real use cases. That's how I see it. But happy to maybe also get another feedback, because I didn't fully understand the cross-domain nature of AI. Well, I understand that the technology is cross-domain in principle, but are all the applications of AI really cross-domain?
Briefly, I think the applications are usually fit for purpose, and therefore you may replicate something in a different domain. But the toolbox and the analysis of requirements and what kind of trust is needed, like you said, with altruistic donation versus open data versus pay per use, these questions come up again and again and again. And each group, in some degree of isolation, comes up with their answers, which is fine until they need to collaborate across group. So agriculture sector may want to cooperate with manufacturing, or with public data for pesticide or health issues. And even in the health industry, everyone knows that unique databases created in different countries and even different hospitals has led to an unfortunate, can you say, well, mistakes and slowing down in getting best practice as well as diagnostics. So there has to be a kind of transition between the, it's like water in the air. You need to have little droplets formed, but then you need to pool these droplets into a number of catch basins. Otherwise, you'll end up with just too much lack of interoperability, and then you cannot get the synergies, and you cannot share, you cannot resell your data, and you even have even higher security risks. So all these things mean there is a real need to get a kind of crowd effect, so that people and companies and governments move eventually into a few common directions rather than 20, 30, 50 different ones. And the Commission at its heart has been doing this since forever. It's just become incredibly, I believe, more difficult since the data economy is starting to take off. So anyway, my comment is good luck, keep working hard, and anything which can help to unite the different data spaces or different users is going to help us in 2-3 years down the road. Thank you.
Yeah, we will certainly rely on Etsy for that. I mean, two comments on three work strands that I see. Well, first is digital identity. There will be, well, it's in the making as a different team that works on a digital ID scheme that works also in B2B and in C2B situations, not only vis-a-vis the government, as the previous EIDAS framework has done. So I hope the colleagues really achieve something meaningful. It will rely on then service providers to actually provide trusted ID and maybe even verified attributes. That's the next the second leg that I find personally very intriguing, where I think also a lot of friction could be taken out, is if you were to come up with a data sharing schema. Now, the notion of a schema, like in the payment industry, you have a payment schema that basically divides roles and obligations and has certain standards for identification, authentication, for consent management, and so forth. That is a bit of a hard seller among policymakers because they technically don't grasp it. But in that respect, I think Gaia X architecture or the iShare scheme that is now tried out in logistics in the Netherlands are, I think, the base layer of solving all the common problems of data sharing as an identity problem, authentication problem, rights management problem that apply across all boards. And then the hardest part is obviously at the level of the data formats. And here my question is also what role data normalization services can play. So sometimes you may just want to hire someone who does the data normalization for you because it would be too costly and too time consuming to develop now, maybe also not effective to develop standards. So also to chip in this kind of element into the discussion that you can have these services. Okay, I see more questions popping in.
Yes, we have a question from Panayotis. Panayotis, do you want to turn on your camera and ask your question directly?
Yes, please. Hi, Malte. Thank you for the presentation. I wonder if you have think about social data, Google review data, tourism platform data, and even public data, because here in Greece, organizations, government, the companies, they need analytics on this kind of data. But of course, GDPR is an issue on this, and also we are working on anonymized data and analytics. So I would like to hear your opinion, your view on this aspect. Thank you.
Yeah, there's an ambition, and that's also Commissioner Thierry Breton, to whom I eventually report with a lot of layers in between me and him. In terms of administration, there's certainly the idea to go for a tourism data space. That is colleagues in another department that work on it. I will note it down to actually find out who that is. What the data space will include is now a question I can't answer. We spoke about the obligations on gatekeeper platforms, so Google is part of this. To my knowledge, analytics data, which are derivative data that Google generates as part of the service, are not covered by Article 6 of the DMA, but I would have to reread it carefully again. So normally there's still a dividing line between derivative data that a company produces, well, big or small, produces and then shares or not. And that is a bit of a crux, that if you have a strong player that you mentioned, and same goes for Booking.com, by the way. I mean, it's not only the Googles that are maybe in scope. They may participate if they see a benefit, but they will probably also want to participate at their terms. That remains a problem that is, I think, a bit harder to solve. And it's also, I don't know, raising questions of how would you possibly be forcing them. That's my take on this question. And thank you, Lindsay, for the comment on the Etsy ISG.
Thank you, Malte. We have another question from.
But if I could just not to give you, sorry, Annika, just to give maybe the hope with this data spaces is also that they host the tools to do analytics in a privacy compliant manner, so that you don't even have to wonder about the level of anonymization, but maybe that confidential processing happens within a secure processing environment. You can do multi-party computation, that all these arrangements are then available in a data space, and that are basically there on a demand offer. That is also our hope and wish for these data spaces, but it's a technical discussion. Sorry, Annika.
No, thank you for clarifying this and going more into detail. I wanted to give the floor to Michael Marti from Universus, who also put his question in the chat. Michael?
Hi, so yeah, I had a question. It's more like I didn't understand something, so sorry for that. But if you could clarify on what the difference between these data platforms that you were mentioning before and the possible data brokering services would be exactly, because I understood you mentioned that the first would not be able to monetize on their data sharing or facilitator role. So if you could clarify on that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate the question, because you're asking probably the hardest question of the whole DGA in terms of the conceptual design. And it's also triggering a lot of reactions from a lot of companies that could potentially be in scope. So let me explain how, in simplified terms, how we see the two models. The first model is, let's imagine you want to have predictive analytics. You as a user of a certain, let's take an airline as an example, because we have an example here with Airbus. If you are an airline, you're a small airline, you have 20 aircraft, the data that you generate by themselves are not good enough for predictive analytics, because it's not the volume that you need. So Airbus, the manufacturer, offers you to basically share your diagnostic data with us. We establish a pool with more airlines like you, and then everyone benefits, and we offer you services. Now, the situation with Airbus, I can't comment on that specific case, is that we don't know exactly what rights Airbus then retains on also to use the data for its own services. You basically do what you have done in the personal data economy, give your data, and you receive a service in return. So you reserve recommendations on diagnostics based on the prediction made on the basis of the data pool. That's, I would say, a classical situation, a classical data brokering situation. And it can even happen not in this kind of client manufacturer situation. You can say, well, I'm selling my diagnostic data now to an independent provider. They aggregate a pool. They may be in the Amazon sphere or whatever. And then they give me something in return, independent of this manufacturer situation. So this is and then the classical data broker situation. What we want to bring into the market is that now, I mean, my airline example, a few airlines band together and say, well, we want to be autonomous, we want to be in control, and we will found a data sharing intermediary, a data pool situation, and that organization is under our control and only serves our interest, because that's a neutral party. And if you want to be in that business of basically helping airlines to pool data that they may have, you will be in the future be captured for this. Insofar, I mean, the example is a bit stretched, because insofar as you basically only go for a small close group, you are actually exempted. You can still form joint ventures without being captured by our regulation. But if this becomes a bit more an open ecosystem situation, so that in my API Agro example of before, you host an open ecosystem where a lot of services can come and offer themselves to say, here's a crowd of farmers, they have interesting data, and this is a new type of service I want to bring to your attention, and here's another new service. And then there's the ecosystem orchestrator that builds, basically administers the data pool, possibly. Then this type of player is captured by our regulation. So these are a bit the two situations. They remain mutually legal, but you should. We think the market should have also this self-monetization option, where companies say, I want to monetize my own data under my control, but I need a bit of help by someone. And I want this service that is at my service and really respects my interests, and that's the new element.
Thanks a lot for the explanation, Malte. I'm actually also curious about that, because I was wondering if among the group we have companies that are maybe thinking of setting up their own sort of data platform, where they would invite others to share data as well. And yeah, so it's actually a question that we still have internally as well, to understand to what extent smaller players would be affected by this, if they have this idea, they want to start something up. Now you said that it would be like, if it's a small group, they would not be included. It's more when it becomes a general sort of ecosystem. But yeah, if my question is thus more to the group itself. If anyone from you who are present, if you're really thinking of setting up such a service, and if you're, if you feel like this act would then actually affect you or not.
Yeah, while you're thinking about asking that question, just to be sure, the group, the closed group has to be stable closed. Once you have people coming and going, you become more an ecosystem orchestrator where new parties can join at their will, with a little bit of control at any moment. The ones that are exempted are really for very defined, very stable groups. It doesn't have to be small because of the number. If it's maybe even 100, but it's always the same 100, it's also exempted, because then you're not. The group basically controls how this third party performs. The dangers we're seeing is, once the third party has a degree of autonomy from those who set him up, then there's a risk that they become the next type of platform, that they also maybe wield market power to basically impose data monetization conditions in their sharing context. So if you want to trade your data through my platform, I will always receive a copy and I will always have something to do with it. Or if this data pool is established among you, I always have a right also to then sell the data from the pool at my own discretion without having to ask you for a mandate. Here we're really speaking about the trust model, this trustee model. You mandate something to monetize data on your behalf in a pool situation, because you wouldn't establish the pool yourself. And now, if any of you thinks about doing this, I mean, don't be also maybe put back. I think the Data Act, the Data Governance Act, is there to also protect you and your idea vis-a-vis models where a big tech company with vertical integration and the network effects can really outcompete you very, very easily. So I think we want to rather protect the Nalians, which is an SME, by the way, of this world, to compete at equal terms with the mega players, because it's a different kind of game. The mega players can have an advantage because the data they would acquire in local ecosystems feed into the general data pool they can vertically integrate, whereas the small player will never have that. So see this also as an opportunity for SMEs to say, well, under these terms, I can actually compete at more or less fair terms with others. Darwex, our poster example of a data marketplace from Lyon, is a medium-sized company. And so we were trying also and in the personal data management system, there's loads of SMEs that think, well, we have a business idea, we're small, and we want to even face the big giants of this world. So take this Data Governance Act as a guarantee that you can actually compete at equal terms with the vertically integrated mega players.
Okay, thanks a lot, Malte, for this answer. I don't see any other question in the chat, so maybe we can take a look at the poll in between, and then I think I would still be interested in perhaps having a feedback from Mikel, because he put this question in the chat. So we could go back to that afterwards, just to see if from his business, if he could maybe explain a little bit what they are doing as a business and how there could be an effect on that. But before doing that, let's quickly take a look at the poll. We have asked the question, wait, I will share my screen. So we have asked the question, how do you think the Data Governance Act will affect you? And we see that there seems to be there doesn't seem to be a view that it would be negative. So this is good news for you, Malte. There's a little bit of neutral, and then no, now we have a negative view. Okay, then I would be curious if the persons who said negatively, perhaps maybe they could explain why they think it could affect them negatively. And also, if you're not sure, maybe you could also, because I think indeed sometimes, you know, it may not be very clear how this could actually affect your business. And it's good to ask this question, you know, like to explain what you are doing and to then see if we can give you an answer here during this workshop. So that would be very, very great. That would be great if the people who said negatively, or they don't know, if they could maybe, you know, just speak up and explain what they're doing, and then maybe we can find an answer to that. So and before that, we had asked the question if people had heard about the Governance Act before, and here I think we had no, wait, this was actually, yeah, we had a majority that had actually heard about it, which was quite surprising to me. And then 40% who said they hadn't heard about it. But yeah, I would suggest we try to pick up on the question about the effect of the Data Governance Act. So the people who said that they don't know, or that it may affect them negatively, do you want to, or could you maybe unmute yourselves and turn on your camera, and just, because it's really this workshop is really about that, in trying to understand, you know, how this can affect SMEs, companies on the ground, and to answer questions that are maybe still unclear. So yeah, I would be very happy if you could put your question either in the chat or just speak up now. And if not, maybe I can give the floor to Vasiliki, who still wanted to ask a question in the beginning. So maybe that can help also to steer the discussion.
Thank you very much, Annika. I'll have to apologize for my camera because I have a horrible connection. So I'm afraid that I may lose you if I switch that on. I hope that you can hear me, first of all. So thank you very much for such an interesting discussion. There was a completely different question in my mind when we started, but I feel I need to reflect on the very interesting poll answers. So it seems that more people are interested in what's happening in the Commission and what's happening in Brussels when it comes to new legislation and policy. So the first question is totally general. Do you feel that the Commission is moving closer to the average SME, to the average stakeholder, rather than only the big players, as we are moving on to a more digital and SMEs premised economy in Europe?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, first I would say we took on the big players with the Digital Markets Act. I think that was not an easy one. We will see also what the lobbying will have for the European Parliament on the Digital Market Act. It's not my file. I'm not a specialist of this act, but they have the power, including the market power that come from data holdings. It's not an unbundling. It's not a breaking up of the Google situation, as you know. We also have the Digital Services Act, which is more responsibility in terms of the content that they intermediate. So I think there's a will in the Commission to really ensure that there are fair markets. Now you spoke about the average SME, but the average SME is really a complicated object. I was in a previous conversation with SME United. I think there's also colleagues in this meeting today. And they say, okay, give me a hinge of the data access problems you have, and how can we strengthen your role? And it came a very varied bunch. I mean, it came the hotels, so that's a booking.com problem, probably, or other booking platforms. It came the repair and maintenance of cars and of lifts. And I sympathize with the two latter because they're more in my IoT data remit. And certainly I see a certain interest to keep ecosystems around IoT objects open and fluid. But I mean, what is the average SME? And that's really a problem for us also when we now think about future policy design. So I think everyone understands that in terms of data access, SMEs are specifically not in the position to create their own data stores. They're dependent on data access for others. But then the question is, why wouldn't contract and contractual freedom basically be the dominant rule, and say if then an ecosystem player, let's say like Siemens or a telecom player or whoever else, sees benefits of collaborating with SMEs and outsourcing certain tasks to specialized proposals, why shouldn't that be then reigned by contract? And how, on what grounds would you intervene to actually set certain rules on fairness, and fairness of what? I mean, that's a question we are really asking us ourselves at this very moment. So we have the SMEs on our minds, but it's a bit hard to generalize in terms of the average SME in our view.
Yes, this is definitely something that we are also very aware of. I think I failed to make the people who were more negative about it speak up, but maybe we can, because that was also something that we wanted to do, to take a screenshot with everyone, because we wanted to make a post about it. So maybe that will also help us to to share, so everyone can see each other, and then we can have maybe a final round of questions afterwards and then close the discussion. So if everyone could turn on their camera, everyone who wants to be in the tweet could turn on their camera, and then we'll do a screenshot, and we will share that on our social media channels with a little note saying that the focus group on AI was meeting with the European Commission. So I still give a few minutes for everyone to turn on their camera. And is Moritz or Fulin still here? Yes, Fulin. I don't actually know if we can. No, it's not possible to sort by the people who have their camera on. Okay, so we'll just do it like this. If I can see someone is driving, sorry for that. It doesn't look very safe. Okay, but we can try. Everyone, please say hello, and we make a screenshot. Hey, and okay, I'm saving it. Wait, one more time because I need to turn off the chat. Okay, one more time. Thanks a lot. Let me do one more because yeah, perfect. I remember that we have this issue with GoToMeeting that it's sometimes not possible for everyone to turn on their camera at the same time. So yeah, apologies for that in case it didn't work for you and you wanted to be on the picture. And thank you also for the dedication for joining us from a car. That is quite challenging. So yes, please, if anyone has a final question to Malte, I think he will be very happy to answer your question. It's a new piece of legislation, so it's clear that it's still something that people have to familiarize themselves with. But I think Malte really helped us to understand what is happening. Question, best link, please. I have one. Yeah, okay. Stilian has a question. I don't understand Lindsay's question.
Just briefly, we got a lot of facts, but I'm sure there's a couple of commission web pages we should look at when we have off time.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
I can send one with to Annika. I mean, we are always many cooks, so drafting documents is always a bit of a challenge because tons of people have ideas how to draft them, and so that we have a press release and the memo, we at least try to explain. But I think, well, I like also these oral means to express what is maybe harder to express in a document that 10 or 15 people have signed off before it was published.
Yeah.
Not because I'm saying things that couldn't be signed off, but it's the drafting. I don't know whether some of you are in the academic field as well. If you are more than 3 co-authors on a document, it becomes very, very difficult to agree on the text within a set time frame.
Yeah. Okay, so
okay.
Stilian would
maybe
like to ask a question. Maybe we can give the floor to Stilian. Stilian, you can unmute yourself if you want to ask it directly. Maybe.
Yeah, thank you. My camera is not functioning, but nevertheless, hello to everybody. I'm curious to see which is because we know that this issue with data is still not closed. There are many open issues, and in this respect, I like to hear your perspective about the process of updating these regulations, because that will be very important. Maybe new use cases will occur. Some other aspects should be updated in this respect.
That's a great question. I can maybe do a final tour d'horizon, as you say, like a panoramic response on what's going on, and a few things I wanted to actually say earlier. So the first practical thing on this specific piece is that it's like a legislative bill. It's like if your national government introduces a certain bill into the parliament, and then the difference between most national systems and the European system is that the bill in the European context almost always is modified because there's no governing majority in Parliament that is kind of backing the Commission just because it's set in place, the Commission. Like in the national government, there's a coalition or one party that basically supports the government and maybe does some technical modifications, but normally doesn't challenge the overall line of what the government has put in place, also because the government normally has much more expertise power behind a proposal. In our context, this proposal has gone to the European Parliament and the Council of Ministers, so the representation of all your national governments. If you speak to governments in your own countries, speak about this, say whether you like it or what you don't like. And then this can also help to inform the discussion in the Council of Ministers that will certainly also propose modifications to this document. And let's make sure that the modifications go in the right direction to make the document better. And the same goes for the European Parliament. I mean, Annika, obviously your task in Brussels is to influence a bit the policy making at this level. And you know how to do that. So it's not even law. What we're just discussing is not even law yet. It's a proposal, and it may become law in, I would say, at the earliest in autumn this year. That's an optimistic time plan, but let's see how it goes. The same goes for the Digital Markets Act on the online platforms. It's also a proposal by the Commission. It will also go through the same legislative modification process that I just described. So we'll see what comes out of this. And then, but on the broader notion, Stelian, what you said, I mean, there is indeed an emerging academic discussion on data law at all. Should there be something like data law? My own take is that it's a data law is very complicated to establish because everything can be data. So the data law would be the law of everything, and that's probably not going to happen. But with the growing importance of data, I think we see a differentiation of legislation around data that tries to solve specific problems that are emerging when we speak about data use. And sometimes it's a data access problem, sometimes it's a data protection problem, or maybe sometimes it's a cybersecurity problem, sometimes it's an identification problem, and all these problems can be solved sometimes with regulation and sometimes maybe not even. I would like to say a final word on data protection, because it's also here important to understand that the GDPR is to stay with us. Last year, the Commission made a first snapshot assessment after 2 years of effective application of the General Data Protection Regulation. And the position of the Commission is that you should not hope for any modification of that regime implicitly or explicitly at all. It's here to stay, and maybe we can improve the application in practical cases, but there's no strategic thinking to unravel that compromise. And also my own take is we don't know whether we would ever in this complicated EU decision making to arrive at a good compromise, because already in every society the discussion on data use and risks and privacy is complicated, and that's even more important at European level. So here also don't expect much. As I said, from an academic perspective, at some point you want to maybe coordinate all these different pieces. We are not there yet. We are at the moment adding little legislative pieces here and there. Maybe in 5 or in 10 years we get to a moment when we can maybe codify, as the lawyers would say, bring everything into one legal text. But that's very far away thinking. Now I'm seeing a question from Kasha. Can you clarify the scope of the proposal? Article says, but in your present, okay. Yeah, that's a good question on the scope, and I'm always trying to avoid a bit the scope question, because in principle any data is in scope. Any data is in scope, but to different the intervention we do really depends on who holds the data and what is basically what should happen. I spoke a lot about voluntary sharing by companies of data they hold and that they are legally entitled to share. I spoke also about individuals that may want to actually make more data held about them available under this portability mechanism. So personal data are in scope, personal data that share by individuals. Individuals or companies may want to voluntarily, altruistically donate data. So it's also that. And then we have the chapter the chapter 2, which is about a specific situation when the public sector holds data and what are obligations on public sector bodies when they have personal data or commercially confidential data in their remit. So it's, I think, so in principle, any data in scope, chapter 2, public sector information or publicly held databases. And then for the others, but also these public sector databases contain business information. That makes it so complicated to describe the object. So it's how to use commercial information held in public databases, and what are the specific roles of public sector bodies as data stewards, if you want to use that term, to maybe play a facilitator role in the usability of this data, but also as a guardian after the interests of the individuals and the companies, and really try to moderate between these two interests at stake. Yeah, I hope that clarifies on that question as well.
Thanks a lot, Malte. Okay, I don't see any further questions. So I would like to thank you very much, Malte, for this really great discussion, for the great insights, the comprehensive overview. And to everyone else, I would like to say that we are going to follow up on this by sharing with you well, a summary of what has been discussed, and we will also, of course, be open to hearing your thoughts about this. If you have any other thoughts in the future, anything you would like to have clarified, we're very happy to collect your questions and to see how we can move on from there. So thank you very much for joining, everyone, and have a good day. Thank you very much, Malte.
Thank you, Annika. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.